The county crew came back after sunrise, expecting to start the yellow backhoe where they had parked it. There was no backhoe. There were tire marks in the grass, a shallow bowl of wet clay, and a pair of orange safety cones leaning inward like someone had set them around a grave. But the machine itself was gone. It had not been stolen. It had not rolled away. It was directly beneath their boots, buried almost 11 feet under a piece of ground that looked firm enough to walk across. The man who had warned them about it was already inside the diesel shop, rebuilding a water pump. His name was Eli Mercer, and he had owned Mercer Diesel and Tractor Repair for 19 years. The shop sat at the ragged edge of a small Missouri town, where the pavement gave up, the mailboxes thinned out, and empty lots still had more memory than money. Eli fixed farm trucks, irrigation pumps, school buses, hay balers, and anything else a working man could drag to his door before it quit for good. He was not a dramatic man. He did not tell long stories while holding a wrench. He did not wave his hands or make himself the center of a room. But he knew that corner of town the way other men knew their own kitchens. He knew which ditch overflowed first after 3 inches of rain. He knew which gravel shoulder would swallow a jack stand in April. He knew where frost came out of the road late, and where water stayed under the grass long after the sun had dried everything above it. And he knew the vacant strip beside his shop. To anyone driving past, it was just unused ground, waist-high weeds in summer, brown grass in winter, a few leaning fence posts from a farm that had disappeared before the subdivision signs went up. But Eli had been told about that strip the year he opened his business. An old well driller named Howard Price came in for a fuel pump, looked out the shop door and said, "Don't ever put weight on the middle of that lot." Eli asked why. Howard told him there had been a clay borrow pit there in the 1940s, dug shallow, abandoned badly, then slowly filled by spring water and silt. The top dried into a crust. Under it was a cold, saturated pocket that did not drain right. Farmers had lost fence posts in it. A mule had once gone down to its chest before they got a chain around it. Kids were told to stay away from it because it looked safer than it was. Eli listened. Not because he was frightened of old stories, but because old stories around work usually started as someone's invoice. Well, over the years, he tested the warning without meaning to. After heavy rain, that part of the lot stayed dark longer than the rest. In August, when the ground around it cracked, that patch still held a dull green shine. Once, a scrap engine block Eli had set near the fence settled overnight until only the lifting eye showed above the grass. So Eli marked the shape of it in his head. It was not the whole lot. That was what made it dangerous. The front corner was firm. The shoulder near the road was fine. A pickup could cross one edge and never know anything was wrong. But the center had no bottom a man ought to trust. Years later, the cable contractor arrived. They were laying underground fiber along the county road. 4 men in reflective shirts, 2 pickups, a spool trailer, a compressor, and a yellow rubber-tired backhoe with fresh paint and rental numbers on the side. They were organized, polite, and quick. By mid-morning they had cones along the shoulder and the backhoe chewing a trench beside the ditch. Eli watched them between jobs, not because he was nosy, but because a machine working next to his property was something worth noticing. The backhoe did fine all day. It crossed the solid edge of the vacant lot. It idled near the road. It carried spoil. It never bogged. The crew had every reason to trust what their eyes were telling them. Near quitting time, they parked it on the grass beside the shop, swung the boom in, dropped the bucket, and started loading hand tools. Eli wiped his hands on a red rag and walked over. The foreman was counting barricades into the truck bed. Eli asked, "You leaving that machine there tonight?" The foreman said they were. The crew would be back early. It saved time not to haul the backhoe to the yard and bring it out again before breakfast. Eli nodded toward the grass. "I'd move it 10 yards toward the road." The foreman looked where Eli pointed. The ground was flat. The tires were clean. The backhoe sat level, heavy and certain. "What's wrong with it there?" "That middle pocket won't hold weight for long," Eli said. "Not that kind of weight." The foreman gave a small smile, the kind a busy man gives when a stranger is trying to help but does not understand the job. "We've been driving over it all day." "You've been driving over the edge," Eli said. "That is different." The foreman glanced back at the machine. Eli tried one more time, still calm. "There's water under that crust. Old pit, bad fill. It may sit there an hour and look fine. It may sit there all night and not be there in the morning." One of the younger men laughed from the tailgate. The foreman did not laugh, but he did close the conversation. "We pulled the keys," he said. "Nobody's taken it." Eli said, "I'm not worried about people." The foreman thanked him anyway, which is what men say when they have decided not to listen without becoming rude. The trucks left in a row, tail lights blinking red at the bend in the road. The backhoe stayed behind. At first, nothing happened. That was the cruel part. The machine did not lurch. It did not fall through like a trap door. It simply settled, tire by tire, as the dry skin of the ground cracked under a weight it had never promised to hold. By midnight, the back tires had sunk past the hubs. By 2 in the morning, the frame was sitting in wet clay. After that, the ground did what bad ground does. It closed around the heaviest thing offered to it. When the crew returned, the first man out of the pickup thought they were in the wrong place. Then he saw the cones. Then he saw the bucket mark. Then he saw the greasy square of mud where a machine worth more than his house had stood the evening before. They walked the lot in widening circles. They checked the road. They looked behind the shop. One man called the rental company before he had even decided what he was reporting. Finally, the foreman crossed to Mercer Diesel and opened the side door. Eli was at the bench, pressing a bearing into a pump housing. The foreman said, "Did you see anybody come through here last night?" Eli did not look up right away. "No." "Our backhoe's gone." Eli set the press handle down. "No," he said. "It isn't." The foreman stared at him. Eli pointed through the open bay door with the red rag. "It's where you left it." The shop went quiet except for the fan belt squeaking on an old wall fan. The foreman said, "There is nothing there." Eli looked at him, not angry, not pleased, just tired in the way a man gets tired when the truth has arrived late and expensive. "It's under there." They went back outside together. By then, the rest of the crew had gathered around the patch. What had looked like a shallow depression was slowly filling with cloudy water. Little bubbles came up through the clay. One corner of the backhoe's amber light was visible for a moment, 6 inches below the surface. Then the water rolled over it, and the ground took even that away. No one laughed then. The foreman crouched, touched the mud with 2 fingers, and understood too late that the surface was not the structure. He asked, "How deep?" Eli said, "If it found the old pit, 10 feet. Maybe 11? The young man who had laughed the night before said something under his breath and stopped. The foreman looked at Eli. "You knew?" "I knew enough to tell you to move it." That was all Eli said. He did not say, "I warned you." He did not make the younger man apologize. He did not enjoy being right, because being right had not saved anyone $1. By noon there were 2 wreckers on the road and timber mats across the shoulder. By mid-afternoon, a vacuum truck was sucking muddy water out of a hole that kept trying to become flat again. Every time they exposed part of the machine, the clay slid back around it. The rental company sent a supervisor. The county sent a man with a clipboard. Somebody found an old survey note in the courthouse records that called the strip seasonally saturated fill. Those 3 dry words suddenly sounded more expensive than a warning shouted from a shop door. It took 2 days to get cables around the axle housings. It took a 3rd day to pull the backhoe out. When it finally came free, it did not look like machinery anymore. It looked like something recovered from a river. Clay packed the engine bay. Mud filled the cab to the seat. The tires hung crooked under the frame. Water poured from places water should never have been. The repair estimate became a number nobody said loudly. A week later, the foreman came back alone. Not for work, not for paperwork. He came through the open bay door while Eli was sharpening a mower blade, and stood there until Eli shut off the grinder. The foreman said, "I should have moved it." Eli nodded. The foreman looked out at the lot. "It looked solid." Eli said, "Most bad ground does." That was the lesson, but Eli did not present it like one. He just went back to the blade. Years later, the vacant land was developed. Houses went up on the high side. The road was widened. The ditches were reshaped. Engineers drained what could be drained and fenced what could not. On the plat map, the soft pocket became a utility easement with a narrow strip of grass nobody was allowed to build over. Children ride bicycles past it now. Sprinklers click over lawns. Porch lights come on at dusk. Nothing about that neighborhood tells you a backhoe once vanished there, because 4 professionals trusted the surface more than the man who had watched the ground for 19 years. Eli's shop is gone now. So is Eli. But the men who worked for him still talk about the way he noticed things. Not loudly, not theatrically, not with the desperate need to be believed. He would see a problem, say it once, say it plainly, and return to the work in front of him. That is a rare kind of authority, the kind that does not come from a uniform, a clipboard, a rental contract, or a newer machine. It comes from standing near the same piece of ground long enough to understand that the surface is only the part willing to show itself. Some men read maps. Some men read manuals. Eli Mercer read the ground, and on that morning the ground proved he had been listening.